I am Andrea Gonzalez with Trellis Strategies. We are so happy you're joining us today. This is the start of our fifth Trellis Strategies 360 discussion series, and we're grateful to kick off this series with the expertise and wisdom of our panelists today. In this series, we're discussing innovative leadership for the modern learner, and we're doing this by having one-on-one conversations with presidents and chancellors of post-secondary institutions. Our discussion will be led by our president and CEO, Dr. Debra Chromy. And while participant videos are off, we do encourage you to share questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll respond to those at the end of our discussion. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Debra, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. And good afternoon, everyone. As Andrea mentioned, I'm Debra Chromy. I'm president and CEO here at Trellis. I'm so pleased that you have joined us to kick off season 5 of the Trellis Strategies 360 discussion series. As Andrea mentioned, during season 5, I have the privilege and honor to engage in conversations with innovative leaders in higher education who are reimagining their institutions for the modern learner. And we'll get to the definition of modern learner if you're not familiar with that in just a minute. But I wanted to start by thanking Chancellor Mike Flores with the Alamo Colleges District for participating in my first conversation. Chancellor Flores is the 9th appointed chancellor and the first Hispanic chancellor in the district's history. Dr. Flores' moonshot vision for the Alamo College District is to eliminate poverty through education. He has received numerous awards and recognition, as have the institutions within the Alamo Colleges District for their innovative and impactful work. But there's one that really stood out to me, and I want to share it with you all today in case you're not aware. During his first year as chancellor in 2018 of the Alamo College District, he was recognized as the first and only community college system in the nation to be awarded the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, which is the nation's highest presidential honor for performance excellence through innovation, improvement, and visionary leadership. And then again, just last year in 2024, he led the Alamo College District to make history and become the only recipient in higher education to receive the Baldrige Award twice since its inception, which is just, I agree, amazing, Ariel. You're absolutely right. It is absolutely amazing. So with that, I am happy to welcome Dr. Flores, and I'm going to ask him if he can start off, because we've got people participating from all over the country today, mainly Texas, but a lot of folks all over. Mike, if you can start by just providing a little context for our listeners about the Alamo College District, how many institutions, et cetera, in the greater San Antonio region.
Our internet went down, so I'm on my phone. So
oh my gosh,
it will go up, and I can go.
So resourceful. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, I just did a very lovely introduction of you, and thank you again, Mike, for joining us. Can you start with providing some context to our listeners about the Alamo College District? How many institutions, students in the greater San Antonio region?
Sure. So, yeah, great to be with you, Debra, and what an exciting kickoff to the academic year, I think, for us, definitely here at Alamo Colleges District, and for everyone in the state, right, as we get ready in the U.S. So Alamo Colleges is a system of 5 institutions that are each individually accredited. And we serve together 88,000 students at the 5 colleges, and then the 8 education and training centers that we have both in Bexar County, but in the surrounding region, right, in Central and South Texas. As part of that, and being able to connect our learners to opportunity. We're celebrating this year 80 years as a district, but our oldest institution, St. Philip's, is over 130 years, and San Antonio College is celebrating their centennial with 100, Palo Alto College 40 years, and Northwest Vista College with 30. So I think a lot of history, a lot of pride in the institution, and definitely a wonderful start to the academic year.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to start off with a little bit of background here on Modern Learner, as I mentioned. as part of this, I just want to make sure you have the context for how we define modern learner. So at Trellis Strategies, we base our work around helping entities to understand and adapt to the modern learner. And we've outlined that in our 2024 Student Financial Wellness Survey results. And I think Andrea can add that to the chat for those of you who may not have seen it. But it's really thinking about the modern learner we see as what you would call, or used to call, the non-traditional student. Those that may have entered college later in life, maybe started, dropped out or stopped out and came back. They may be parents, they may be working full-time or part-time, having other priorities in their life, but they've got so many other things going on. And what I do want to say is they are the majority of folks that are going to post-secondary ed right now, and particularly at community colleges. So let me just provide a couple of data points from our survey just to ground you all in this. About 2/3 of our respondents, and this was people we surveyed from across the country, work for pay while they're enrolled. Many of those working students full-time, 43% of them are working full-time and hold more than one job. About 25% of them hold more than one job. And over a third of them, 36%, identify primarily as a worker that goes to school rather than a student that works. And this is really important. So affording a post-secondary education is increasingly challenging for these learners, these folks we call modern learners. Overall, the many demands on students' time can impede their academic progress. For example, by limiting their ability to attend class consistently. If classes are only 9 to 5, that makes it really difficult for someone who's working 40 hours a week. In our 2024 survey, 24% of parents had missed at least one day of class due to a lack of childcare. 25% of working students missed at least one day of class due to conflicts with their work schedule. And 15% of respondents missed class due to lack of transportation. So these are all things we need to think about when we're thinking about the modern learner. Despite all these challenges, 73% of the folks who responded agreed that college is a good investment in their financial future. And 84% of them believe a college degree will provide them with a higher quality of life. So we have to deliver on that expectation to this population of students. Students attending two-year institutions were especially likely to believe in the value of college, and were also more likely to say they would recommend their school to a prospective student. And that, for the most part, makes up most of the institutions, although we'll talk a little bit about the bachelor's program, but most of the students who attend in the Alamo College District. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So with that context, I'm going to back up and go back to Mike and ask him, what inspired you to tackle poverty through education, this moonshot that you have, and how has that vision evolved over the past 5 years?
Wow, wonderful question and prompt. And I'm just thinking of the context, right? And the kind of the groundwork and providing that frame for modern learners. I think for us, it's very similar in localized context and knowing who we serve, particularly the community. So San Antonio has, wonderful feel, a great community, aspirational. But one of our challenges has been not producing enough credentialed talent. And that intersects with really a high rate of intergenerational poverty, one of the highest that within the United States of urban poverty rates. The American Community Survey just released results, and we end up, again, we've been number 3 for some time in urban poverty, only surpassed by Detroit. And then number 2 was Houston with 14%, and San Antonio with 13%. So for us, we know that is actually generational, unfortunately passed down from parent to child. And so we know that the difference between struggle and success, more than any other determinant, right, is a post-high school credential. And so that really, looking at our community context, looking at the challenges that our neighbors confront, that is really what our moonshot is about, is how can we create more opportunity for our neighbors? And so how can we attack, right? How can we address that high intergenerational poverty rate? And the difference between struggle and success is that credential. And then we've had several forays or several things that we've done to address that. So from that proof point, Debra, we then looked at one of the largest segments of our learner population, which were graduating high school seniors enrolling in higher education. In 2018, that was 45%. So we launched our Promise program called Alamo Promise, and directed that first at those Title I high schools that had the lowest college going rate. And that hovered anywhere from 25 to 35%. Imagine that. And the other part that we looked at was that in conversations with prospective learners, that the challenge was not their academic ability. The main consideration was, can I afford to go to school? And it wasn't largely tuition. It was, can I afford to work less hours? Can I afford to give my mom less money from my paycheck, to help pay the rent, to help buy groceries, to pay for utilities? All of those things. So the calculus was related. It was an opportunity cost largely as part of that. So one is knowing community context. The other were, what were the big ideas or big bets that we were going to make to be able to change the trajectory for large swaths of our community? So Alamo Promise, in particular, looking at that high school to college matriculation rate, was what we launched in 2019. Really, it's a collective impact strategy, working with community stakeholders, bringing community leaders together. Our mayor at that time, our county judge, chambers, the general manager from our Toyota plant here, all of those key folks who really said, we want to make a difference. One of the things that was a takeaway for me, and I think it relates to the agency that we have, either within our organization or within our positions, was the school superintendent coming back and saying, I think for many of us, we didn't know that we could do big things until you brought us together in discussing Alamo Promise. And that was a collective impact strategy, something at scale that really moved the needle, going from 45% baseline in 2019 college going rate in our county to now close to 55%, right, in 2024. Is that the sole reason? No. But is that a large reason? Yes. And then also being able to do what we call promise to promise, right? Then UT San Antonio, 4 years after that, launching Bold Promise, and then us being able to look at a pathway of Alamo to Bold Promise. Same thing with A&M San Antonio, all of those things. The other, which I would offer as being framed within our moonshot, is COVID, right? COVID coming, in 2020, 2021 to us as part of that. And then looking at something that was, I think, just an illustration. The New York Times covered, we had a mobile food distribution, and we had miles and miles of cars lined up. That was, I think, jarring for many of us within San Antonio. It was jarring for our mayor at that time. And he brought a group of stakeholders together and said, what can we do to upskill individuals? Well, at that time, unemployed individuals, and upskill and move from a traditional reliance on a service sector economy to look at what are high wage and demand jobs that we can train for. And using, at that time, federal COVID dollars for a job training program that then evolved into what's now called Ready to Work, which is a $200 million training initiative in our community, in which Alamo Colleges is one of 4 prime partners, one of the main individuals to be able to both work with folks that are unemployed, but also underemployed, and then also upskilling that community. And I offer that because that's going to prepare us for something that we call Workforce Pell, right? That will launch next year. So I think it is, what are the teachable moments, looking at community context for us as higher ed leaders, practitioners, what are then takeaways from what we do in our daily work to be able to then help and work with others to transform our community.
That's great. And I'm going to ask you to dive down a little bit on Alamo Promise and help us to understand, what that means to those students. What does it look like for them? Are there other wraparound services that are part of that really help them address, as you mentioned, the opportunity cost of do I go to school or do I work? And think about how that has reshaped access to education in Bexar County.
Yeah, I think most importantly, one of the things that we did early on, and we go through iterations or eras, right, of our work. So community colleges in particular have focused on access. And one of the things is we've also been called a revolving door as institutions, right? So about 10 years ago, we launched on a student success journey, really focusing on beta testing some promising practices. And then the charge from our board at Alamo Colleges District is, if it works for 1 or works for 1,000, it should work at scale. So we looked at that time, on average, close to 90 hours and over 4 years that it took a student to graduate from one of our 5 colleges, and said, how can we ensure that our house is in order here at Alamo? And then one of our biggest forays really that taught us, I think it taught us that we could do big things at scale, all of us working together, was Alamo Advise, which is a case management system, ensuring that we would connect a caring professional, right, what we call a CA, a certified advisor, at each one of our colleges with a student from connection to completion. So it's case managed. That advisor is to be with them from right before the start of their first semester until they cross the stage. And that's done at scale across our 5 colleges to be able to do that, to one, establish a relationship, but establish trust with the student, and to ensure that the student had somebody that was going to champion and partner with them each course and each semester along the way. Once we did that, right, we knew that we could do things at scale. The other part, which you mentioned, Debra, is our students are not derailed from academic ability. They're largely challenged and derailed and stop out because of out of classroom challenges. So this was also the beginning in 18, 19, and 20 of the conversation on basic needs, right? And I think, shame on us that we thought that hunger would suddenly disappear when perhaps a student in that segment graduated from high school and received free and reduced lunch and then just arrived on our campus. But hunger was no longer a consideration for them. So our board, and thankfully this was 6 months before COVID started in 2019, 2020 fiscal year, we established what we call our Student Advocacy Network, basic needs support centers at scale. We started at 2 colleges, and from that, the promising data, student metrics, looking at the improvement, then brought that to scale across the 5 colleges and soon through our education and training centers to be able to provide emergency aid. This is pre-HERF, to provide emergency aid, to provide support in a food pantry, but also in partnership with our food bank here in San Antonio to case manage and do an assessment for state and federal benefits for SNAP, to be able to provide short-term and long-term individual and group counseling, and to do all of the things that are necessary to ensure that our students stay on track. Some folks would call that mission creep, right? But we know that anything that stands in the way from a student graduating is our mission. And so I think those two things in particular, being able to establish a relationship with a student, case management practices, basic needs supports, are what we did first before we would then be able to bring more students onto our campuses, right? Make sure our house is in order before we invited some visitors in, and then being able to do that. So Alamo Promise then was the next foray after Alamo Advise, after our student advocacy network, to ensure that we can bring more students and connect with those learners. And we have experienced since the launch of Alamo Promise, it's not the main factor, but one of the factors, enrollment growth of over 30% since 2019, right? So we have had double-digit growth, other than one COVID year, and have grown from 50,000, right, in 2018 to now 88,000 this August or this fall. One of those is Alamo Promise, but it really is ensuring that we look at promising practices, we talk with our learners, we talk with faculty and staff and community partners, and we figure out strategies that are going to connect them both in the classroom and outside of the classroom.
And so I know you shared with us your enrollment growth. What about persistence and completion?
Right.
Have you seen those numbers also increase?
Yes.
I know we had the pandemic in the middle of it, which maybe skews things a little bit, but have you seen that this case management approach and the advocacy centers have made a difference?
Yeah, especially I would say that at scale, we've seen, I mentioned close to 90 hours to graduate with a 60-hour associate's degree. That is now across our 5 colleges, 64 hours for students to be able to graduate with their associate's degree. We have one institution actually that is at 60 hours.
Nice.
Right. So they're right on track, connecting with the certified advisor, being able to connect with faculty in the classroom. And now time to degree is 3.5, right?
Nice.
5 years ago, it was 4.5, and we've shaved off close to 8 months in time to degree for our students, because we all know, right, that time is the enemy of degree completion. And so both time to degree and number of hours, the advisors connecting with the learner, and then utilizing what we call our transfer advising guides, right, which are kind of legacy 2+2 programs, and other things that we've done in our portfolio. But those are the biggest bets that we've done to be able to effectuate student success.
Yeah, and I know I was out on your campus a little while back, and very impressed with the transfer piece that you've put in place to make sure that when students transfer, they don't have to repeat courses at the institution they transfer to, which is huge. But I did want to ask you, going back to our modern learners. So you started off by talking about Alamo Promise and working with K-12. Let's talk a little bit, and you mentioned some of this, but how the district is addressing barriers for modern learners, such as parents or working adults, in both accessing and completing a program that leads to a job that they end up better off than they started coming in.
Yeah, I think that's first of all, I think that's the work that we should be doing. I'm also, thankful to the state, right, for House Bill 8, yes, which provides us, right, I think it recognizes who we serve as community colleges, and provides support for, academically and economically disadvantaged students, as well as, most importantly, also those 25 years of age plus. So I think that's the other part, looking at the modern learner population, if they are single, and then also looking at parenting students. I mentioned not only being able to provide the academic advisor, but also the advocacy center basic needs supports. I think that's also key. And then looking at what are the other considerations that modern learners or parenting students have in their lives on a daily basis. So we're looking at being able to ensure that we provide those supports at scale. One of the things that we did in utilizing emergency aid during the COVID era was actually also providing additional aid to parenting students, right? Close to 75% more, because we saw that that was something that was needed. The other thing is looking at childcare considerations. So we beta tested at one of our colleges and soon several drop-in care. So we have a strategic partnership with YMCA that is providing both summer camps co-located on our campuses in the summer, but most importantly, a student at Northwest Vista College, and then we're soon going to bring that to scale, is able to register for evening or online courses and also reserve a spot for drop-in care that is supported by the YMCA at Northwest Vista College. So I think it is being able to be in dialogue, right, and ask modern learners, what are your needs? What are the things that we can do to support you and your family on this journey? And we still have a lot of work to do to be able to do that. I think, as you mentioned, right? The modern learner is not connecting from 8 to 5. The modern learner needs supports after 5, often probably between 8 and midnight, right? And also needs to be able to do that in multiple ways. So I think that's the other key. And I just want to thank, my colleagues for being able to provide that support. I think the coordinating board as well has done a wonderful job. We just had a parenting student summit at Palo Alto College a couple of months ago. I know that Trellis Strategies and Trellis, right, has been involved in this work as well. And I think that's critical, is how do we create that dialogue? How do we kind of create the prompts and the really forceful nudges so that as higher ed practitioners and leaders, we're aware of the things that we need to do? Something that happened most recently is one of our students was profiled in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, Bridget Ellis. It was in last week's publication. It went on air early last week, and she chronicles her journey as a modern learner, as a parenting student, and all of the things that were so critical in her life. And the other part was just making connections with individuals, with your advisor, with faculty members, folks that care, and demonstrating that, they have agency to be able to cross that graduation stage.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think many institutions are struggling and trying to figure out how to address some of these issues. We held a Modern Learner Summit last week in Austin and just heard some amazing stories of different pieces that are happening, including involving faculty and making sure that they understand who their students are, right? That they're not all 18-year-olds who are, their full-time job is going to school. Like, that does not make up the population, and therefore makes them more understanding of the challenges that students are facing, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the other part, as you mentioned. So how do we role model that, right? If you don't see it, you can't be it. And so even in advertising, being able to showcase a parenting student with their children, right? And what we do so that folks can see themselves represented on our campuses and within the organization.
Yeah. Here in Texas, for those of you who are participating or out of state, we are growing by leaps and bounds, right? So we have so many people, and to your point earlier about, moving from poverty to, using education as a way to move out of poverty. We have so many opportunities for all folks to get an education or get the credentials that are necessary for the jobs that are just growing by leaps and bounds here in the state of Texas. And so I wanted to ask you if you could share examples of how credentials have helped students to transition, like from short-term certificates to sustainable careers or degrees.
Yeah, I think one of the things was, I mentioned Ready to Work earlier, the city job training program. We have seen individuals enter, right, earning less than $20,000. These are predominantly students, women of color, parenting, right, parenting learners. And that doubles as a result of a short-term certification, oftentimes within healthcare, which I think is valuable because those are also stackable credentials, right? So an individual can enter as a patient care technician, embedded within that, perhaps her certifications in phlebotomy, in medical assisting, to be able then to get employment that we know is largely going to be a family sustaining wage. As part of that, then how does that patient care technician with those micro credentials or industry certifications that are embedded within that pathway lead to an individual perhaps going on to be an RN that is offered at 4 of our 5 colleges, that is in a pathway to a BSN. So for us, what we've done, because we're so big, so we try and kind of break that down into smaller chunks or pieces. We have done work over the last 2 years. We have over 300 workforce programs. So we want to make sure that we break that down into buckets or institutes in which students can understand the pathways to the middle class. So for instance, I mentioned the patient care technician. So we have a school of nursing that's going to be championed by San Antonio College that has the BSN. So we're pathing, right? We want to provide that pathway for an individual to be in workforce or development in the Ready to Work program as a CNA, to then be able to move to be an LVN that's offered by St. Philip's College, to then apply to the 4 schools for the RN, to then go to SAC for the BSN. And we want to be able to model or mimic that in each of the other pathways that we have. We tend to make things in education a little complex, right? And so we want to be able to break that down for our students, looking at those particular pathways in those sectors, and then talk about jobs, because they know what they want, and then we want to talk about wages related to that. And I think that's particularly key. The other thing I'm really excited about is not only micro-credentials that are embedded within whether they're short-term certifications or the associate's degree or bachelor's, but also look at how we can affirm what individuals have done in their daily work lives. Mm-hmm. So also looking at apprenticeships and credit for prior learning, but apprenticeships in particular, of being able to give credit for work experience and being able to hardwire relationships with the employers. Because what folks are doing 9 to 5 or 40 hours a week is really the currency that we need to be able to translate and give credit for today's modern learners in particular.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the apprenticeship that is in the work that they're training for is incredibly valuable in terms of when they get out, they might get hired by that employer or have something on their resume that shows that they have that real work. And I agree with you, credit for prior learning, especially as I think about our military or think about those that have some college but no credential and maybe have been working for 3 or 4 years. How do we help move them along the path a little bit faster? I love all of that. I did want to ask you, though, I know you launched Alamo U, which is awarding bachelor's degree. And why did you feel the need to create that? I'm just curious about why you moved forward with that initiative.
It's all about the modern learner. So I think one of the things I mentioned, the schools. So the schools of, right, they're actually all linked to Alamo U and the workforce-oriented baccalaureate degrees. So SAC has a robust nursing program, the ADN or RN. And then they started the BSN. So we really want to give them students an opportunity and a ladder to recognize that. We know that the RN to BSN is largely can be done online, minimal clinical hours, right? So it's an affirmation of what they're doing in the workplace. And so that's particularly critical. Palo Alto College, right, offers a Bachelor's of Applied Technology and Management. So they will be the School of Management. I would tell you the affirmation of the need of the modern learner They started that 18 months ago with 0 students, and they have close to 700 students.
Wow.
The other part is being strategic in the design and ensuring that those are largely in quarters in 8-week terms. Those can be done either on campus or online. And then that those can be done, right? I put quotations around that at any one of our 5 colleges, like a 3+1, and then the individual can, in quotations again, transfer to that institution, whether that's a management degree at Palo Alto College, whether that's a BSN at San Antonio College, cloud computing at Northwest Vista College, which will have the School of Emerging Technologies, right, utilizing that same methodology, or the cybersecurity engineering at St. Philip's College. So the intent in creating Alamo U several years ago was workforce-oriented baccalaureates and having a seamless pathway from any one of our 5 institutions or the 8 centers to be able then to move along the credential ladder. And then the same thing with the schools. So it's really connecting different pieces together within the organization to make a cohesive whole.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is, I mean, those areas that you mentioned are all high demand jobs. And,
Yes.
four-year institutions in the greater San Antonio area are not going to be able to fill all of the jobs that are needed. And the second piece, which I worried about a little bit with folks transferring, is you have built this model where you're really hand-holding students through the entire program. What happens, especially for modern learners, when they go to an institution that doesn't have those supports in place? And so the fact that it stays there and you're able to continue that work, I'm assuming, I have no data to back this up, but I would assume it would increase the completion, persistence and completion rates.
Yeah, most definitely. I think anything that we do, because we're such a big organization, really, as I noted earlier, has to be done at scale. And we often partner, right, with entities like Trellis or Trellis Strategies or others nationally to be able to form, an internal learning community and to be able to glean, the best thoughts from your organization or from other organizations. What are promising practices that work, and what are things that we can do at scale? So, we looked at, and I mentioned the decrease in the time to degree and credit hours necessary for an associate's degree. We also kind of assess, right, either formative, right? How are things at this point in time? How do they compare to how they were last year? So we want our students to graduate with that credential. We know it's an ROI directly in their pocketbook. Earlier, in the academic year of 24-25, we were lagging a little bit in credential completion. We were looking at points in time, from the previous year to this year. What did it look like? What are the things we need to do? We knew we had the students right in the talent pipeline to be able to get them through. So we use a methodology. It's called the 4 disciplines of execution. It's fairly simple, right? We gathered for weekly virtual huddles Thursday mornings at 8:30 to be able to move the needle. Our initial goal was to have 12,000 students graduate for the academic year. And we just celebrated last week at our board meeting, 14,000 students crossing, right, and getting a credential, a certification, associates, and actually a bachelor's degree. So that increase overall, right, percentage-wise, was really just the strategic focus and intentionality. Having myself, the presidents, for a 30-minute call, right? You have 50 people together on a virtual huddle, reporting out progress, promising practices from one institution. How can we, elevate that through all 5? But I think that's what it takes on a daily basis to be able to ensure that our students are successful. And there are other things that we've done. And I think it's just incumbent upon all of us to ask questions, prompts, right? Be able to challenge ourselves and others. because the direct beneficiaries are learners, are individuals and their families. I think that's the other part, is they're making great sacrifices to register, to come onto a campus, connect online to a course with a faculty member or a staff member, and we deserve to give them the very best.
I couldn't agree more. I'm going to turn a little bit now to talk about you and your leadership. In particular, what leadership lessons have you learned as chancellor, and how do you cultivate that community and drive across your team and across your institutions? Because this is change, and a lot of people don't like change, and you've been able to accomplish quite a bit. So can you talk a little bit about what you've learned, and again, how you get other people to come along with you and to, as you say, embrace these bold, big ideas?
Yeah, I think what's important for all of us, right, as practitioners and leaders, is that we have agency, right? We are always seeking as educators to affirm the agency that our learners have, or our colleagues, but I think we also need to own our role and our position and utilize the agency that we have. It can be collaborative, collective impact, I think, is very important, right? So how do we cast that future state and that vision? I think that that's particularly important for all of us. What is the potential that we have as an individual in our role, but as a team within our unit or our organization to be able to achieve those things? So it's a careful calibration, one, between engagement and efficiency, right? Time. The other part is just connecting to the whole. Oftentimes, we may focus on specific tactics, but those tactics all lend themselves to an overarching strategy. So I think that that's the other part that we need to be mindful of. When I arrived in this position, right, I've been with Alamo since 1999, but when I arrived started this position in 2018, and talking to colleagues in the interview process or the board, it was like, we're a big organization. Anything that happens in our community, we really need to be at the table, literally and figuratively. You know, the chancellor, presidents, board members, and others should be at the table to lend themselves to discussions in which we're going to change the future trajectory for our neighbors, family, and friends, but for our community overall. And so I think that that's the critical part in being able to cast that future state and being able to own our own agency within the position and the agency that we have as an organization, right? Alamo, 5 years ago had a all funds budget of $500 million. Our budget now is $1.2 billion, close to 6,000 employees, close to 90,000 learners that I mentioned. We did a bond of $450 million in 2017. We just had a successful bond of close to $1 billion with a 70% approval rate. So I think it is, we have resources. We definitely have lots of talent within our organization. Can we cast the future vision of the lives that we want to partner with to impact? And that means for our students, right? That means an ROI with their Alamo Colleges credential of $500,000 between a high school diploma, and at that time it was an associate's degree. If we look at them earning a bachelor's degree from us, then the ROI, the delta on that has greatly increased.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about this almost $1 billion
Yes.
bond. And what are your thoughts about innovations or infrastructure investments, or what are you most excited about in terms of how you're going to use that money?
Well, I think one of the things I remember, Richard Reeves, right, who's an economist and writer, commentator. He mentioned, we brought him actually in 2018 to our faculty convocation, and he said, you can ask your students, he said, you can ask them what their major is, but you really need to ask them, have they done an internship?
Mm.
Have they done something in which they are exploring what they want, the field they want to pursue, right? So one of those things that we looked at is we realized at scale, our students don't have that social capital, right? Perhaps we know folks who are in that field. I have two daughters. I have a 19-year-old. When she was doing career exploration, I could reach out to folks to be able to see if she can shadow them or talk to them about their profession. For our students, they don't have that social capital, so we need to hardwire that at scale. So we did several strategic initiatives to connect that. That has evolved into our bond, the $987 million, close to $1 billion bond. I'm really excited because the vast majority of that is going to workforce programs and going to opportunities to connect students directly with employers. So what does that mean? So we will have 3 additional sites in our county that are going to be directly at economic sector campuses. So I mentioned nursing earlier. We have the South Texas Medical Center. We have no physical presence within the medical center. Right. So now with the bond, there's a $95 million facility that will house the San Antonio College School of Nursing that will provide our students in nursing and in health professions from all of our programs, from all 5 of our colleges, to be there, to directly connect with employers, directly go to clinical sites, to provide employees in the South Texas Medical Center with a physical connection to the School of Nursing or Alamo Colleges overall. The other part,
they can upskill and reskill and
yes,
they can move up the ladder too.
yes. So it's a connection with our current learners, and it's a connection to prospective learners to be able to upskill. That's one of the sites. The other is called Port San Antonio, which was one of those decommissioned Air Force bases over 15 years ago, but now has close to 30,000 individuals working on site for IT, aerospace, and aviation companies. So this will be the site of Northwest Vista College's School of Emerging Technologies that will connect students from Northwest Vista College and the other colleges, right, to that new $75 million new build facility. Yeah. And so the same premise, right, that our learners can connect to mentors and employers there, and that those individuals that are needed to upskill within those organizations can physically then connect. The other part is that hopefully Port San Antonio is seeking to be and establish a Department of Defense intelligence campus and cybersecurity presence there. So our students will be on site, right? Will be just, 10,000 feet away from that campus, perhaps. Outside the security perimeter, but being able to connect to best-in-class employers there. So looking back to Richard Reeves and saying, the social capital of what you should do as educators is ask individuals not only what they're going to major in, but how can you hardwire that connection between theory and practice, right? The practice. And now that we're going to be able to build new facilities in those economic sector campuses as a result of this bond.
Yeah. So in hearing you talk, you haven't spent all of it yet. So I'm assuming there is, you have more things, and you don't need to divulge them at this point, but you have more thoughts and ideas yes. about what you're going to do and sort of following in this same model that you've just talked about with these 2 different opportunities here.
And I think that's the other part. And then we learn, I think as educators, we're naturally a learning community, right? So looking at others, looking at what you are doing in your engagements, how you're challenging us within the field, the first rate, just in time information that you provided as a result, right, of the financial health and wellness survey, the modern learner engagement and summit, all of those things, Debra, that I think are so impactful for us that cycle back directly into the field that provide just-in-time information of what our learners are thinking about, and how can we do that? And then also other organizations. I mean, that's really critical for us as practitioners to have information right at our fingertips to be able to do that. The facilities, I would mention, within the state, right? We just hosted a team from Austin Community College, right? A couple of weeks ago, last week, Collin County College, and we learned from Russell and his team at ACC. We are going to send folks to visit the facility at Collin County, their technical center and campus. Everyone, when we talk to and looking at this bond, talk to individuals, architects and others, they say, well, have you seen the Highland campus in Austin, right, as kind of a place to bring people together? So I think that's what I really appreciate. There are wonderful things that are going on throughout the 50 community colleges in Texas, definitely, as you mentioned, also within the United States or even globally from other higher ed leaders and practitioners. So how can we hardwire that to learn from each other? And I want to thank you and your leadership in how over 4 years, right, you have also challenged us as practitioners and leaders, and also your team, to provide information that ensures that we provide a better educational experience for our learners.
Thank you so much for that. And it truly is our honor and privilege to work with you and all the other institutions in the state of Texas. I will say it is amazing the work that is happening among you. I do want to stop for a minute to see if there are any questions that have popped up. I'm sorry I've gone on longer than I thought, but I could keep talking to you, Mike, for another hour. But let's see, Andrea, do we have any questions that have popped up?
No, none have come in. So if there's one final question you would like to ask him, we still have
Sure.
time for that, or we'll see if any come in.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because that last comment that you made me think about the fact that what I have seen happening across Texas, mainly on a regional basis, but some across Texas, is a move towards collaboration. In other words, knowing that no institution can solve all of the employment needs that in that region or in the state. And so not only is there an interest in collaborating and not thinking of each other as competition anymore, but how do we work together? But I've seen employers really interested in the conversation with institutions and in particular community colleges, but and helping to develop curriculum or helping to understand what are the skills that are needed so that when students complete or to partner for apprenticeships or internships so that they are getting what they need, and answering that question that has been, at least in the media for the last couple of years, is college worth it? And changing that whole conversation to something that says, yeah, absolutely it is. And here's an example of why, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would offer that there's plenty of examples, wonderful, promising practices that you mentioned, and how can we uplift and herald those to our neighbors, right? Case studies, working with employers, what that looks like. We've done that in partnership, for instance, with the U.S. Chamber and Talent Pipeline Management. We have a wonderful example here with EY, in which they've hired close to 200 either current learners or graduates, and as a result of that are providing a pathway within their organization. And it was because they couldn't find the credentialed talent that they needed. So in conversation with us and our economic development arm in the community, Greater SATX, that all came together. We have Toyota here, Toyota Texas, right, in their plant and being able to manufacture Tundras. But the other part is that we have dealerships that need to be able to provide trained technicians, and that really calls for a lot of skill. So we were in conversation with Toyota of North America because we didn't have what's called the Toyota T10 program, which is the Toyota Technician Program. And that was, our president of Palo Alto College working in tandem with dealerships in that area with the GM at Toyota. and then connecting with Toyota North America. But the best thing about that was also learning from Collin County and Austin Community College and the dedicated facilities they built, and then taking a site visit to Baton Rouge to look at their facilities. So it's partnership. I would tell you our moonshot is partnering to end poverty through education and training. We're big, as I mentioned earlier, but we can't do it alone either. So partnership is the key with others in the field, definitely with employers, and definitely with organizations like yourself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment. And, I've always believed that, and it sounds like you do as well. And maybe through personal experience for both of us, if you raise up an individual, you raise up a family. If you raise up a family, you raise up a community. And I also believe it only takes one generation to create wealth and to get that going. And so I can't say how much I appreciate you being with us today, but more importantly, the work that you are doing in San Antonio and your partnerships and thinking outside the box and working to deal with the big problems, the big issues, and finding solutions for that. I can't wait to see how you spend that $987 million bond. I'm just so excited about all the work that's happening in San Antonio. And thank you for your partnership. It's Trellis Company, Trellis Strategies, and I know Trellis Foundation as well. We have all been incredibly supportive of the work that's happening in the San Antonio area, and in particular with the Alamo Colleges. So thank you again for your time today. Thank you for sharing your experience and what's been happening. And I'm pretty sure that you're open to other people who might want to come and visit your campus and learn from you, or vice versa.
Yeah, most definitely, Debra. And I just want to give thanks to you. I want to give thanks to my 6,000 colleagues, right, who support the close to 90,000 learners each and every day. Student success at Alamo is a team sport, and we all work together to ensure our students are successful.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone, for joining us. Bye.